El día de hoy tendremos a dos conferencistas extranjeros, uno de ellos alemán y otro inglés. En primer lugar tendremos la participación del arquitecto Michael Schumacher, que es arquitecto originario de Krefeld, Alemania, egresado de la Universidad de Kaiserslautern, con estudios de posgrado en arquitectura en Alemania, en la escuela Sustentable en Frankfurt, con el profesor Peter Cook. Él ha trabajado con Norman Foster dentro de su práctica profesional en Londres y con Brown and Schorlerman en Frankfurt. De su vida académica ha sido profesor visitante en la en la escuela Stadel, donde hiciera su posgrado, y desde el año 2007 ha sido profesor de Diseño y Construcción de la Facultad de Arquitectura y Paisaje de la Universidad de Leibniz en Hannover. Dentro de algunos cargos distintivos, ha sido el presidente nacional de la Asociación de Arquitectos Alemanes en Hesse, Alemania, del periodo 2004 a 2009. Pues bien, daremos inicio a su presentación. Bienvenido, Michael. Michael, you can start now your presentation. Thank you very much for being here and welcome to Mexico. Un aplauso. Por favor.
Yeah, thank you very much for your introduction, and thank you very, very much for your invitation. I was already in Mexico 20 years ago, and I found out there are no beetles any longer on the streets. When I was here 25 years ago, it was all full of, I remember, green beetles, and now completely different cars are here driving around. I have an office in Frankfurt together with my partner Till Schneider, and we started that office in 1989. I know that this whole lecture here is about sustainability, and I was thinking what I can present you, and in the end, my partner and me, we are, since we started the office and made architecture, we are very aware of the fact of sustainability and of energy saving. But I still nevertheless think that this lecture is more about architecture in general. We have a very easy definition for sustainability. We think that if you make architecture and it's long-lasting and it's beautiful, then it's sustainable. All the rest, all these measurements, all the glass and the window and the wind and all these sort of things, all really sustainable architecture had that also in former times. So I decided to myself that I present you, of course, the first part is I make 3 points, what is important for us. It's important for us to fit into general context wherever we build. It's important for us to think about innovation, and I try to explain what we think is innovation. And it's important for us to think about detailing. And then after I did that, I show you 3 projects which are important for us in a closer view. Okay. Well, my name is Michael Schumacher, and I'm the architect. If somebody understood that wrong, now it's a time to leave. I'm not the racing driver, I'm the architect. And nevertheless, I start with a car with that name. I start with a car, with a Bugatti, since the first part I'm talking about is about authenticity, about making things real, not making things have a spirit in a place, belonging to a place, belonging to the people of a place, belonging to the landscape of a place. And since in Europe, it's probably here the same, projects where you can focus on this aspect, but more or less it's a lecture about our work in a way. It has 2 parts. Sustainability starts with working with the existing buildings, and this was obviously an existing old car. I take this as a good example how we can deal with existing buildings. In our office, 50% of the projects are with existing buildings, not new projects. And this car I like very much, since the story of that car is that an architect, by the way, owned it, and he had problems with his job, and so he had to pay tax in Switzerland for this car, and he couldn't pay the tax, and so he decided to get rid of the car, and he drove it in Lake Lago Maggiore to save the tax, and there it stayed for 70 years. And you see what was the end of that. And another tragic story of that was, it was an aim for divers in Lake Lago Maggiore. They knew that this wreck was lying 70 meters in the deep. And one of the divers, a young man, was killed by some rowdies, by unpleasant young people. And to save money or to get money to prevent this sort of accidents, they decided to take the car again to the surface and sell it. And so it was auctioneered, the car, on auction, and it was sold for $260,000, which is interesting for this sort of rust. And two bidders competed with each other, one with the aim to renovate the car and the other one to leave it as it is. And I think that is very interesting, since the one who wanted to leave it as it is won. He got the car, and so it stays somewhere. I think it's in America somewhere. And it's left like this, since the idea was, this is the authentic Bugatti from 1925. And if you change it, it will lose its authenticity. But of course, you cannot use it then. And that's the difference to architecture. When we work with old buildings, we have to change them, since they are unpractical or have the wrong size or have an energy system that is not efficient or not good. So we have definitely always changed buildings. But nevertheless, to keep the spirit is the right way. As I said, with this, we cannot do it in the same way. There you can leave it to keep the authenticity, and we have to change them. And I'll show you now some projects where we change it a bit. I make that in a very quick manner. For example, this project is the American embassy after the war. You know maybe that Germany was very heavily destroyed, since we, the aggressors, lost the war. And so after the war in 1957, I think, this embassy was built, American embassy in Frankfurt, by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. And these buildings at that time, they were in Germany, that was the peak of modern architecture. It was fantastic for the Frankfurt architects to see these sort of buildings, new facade systems. That was very innovative at that time. But the building came in the years, and so 5 years ago it looked like that, and it was actually, you couldn't rescue it. It was completely run down, and these kind of buildings are not built for lasting long, actually. And so it was not protected in Germany, so we couldn't tear down, actually. But we decided to renovate it. And what we tried, in actual fact, we more or less tore it down. The only thing which stood was, in the end, the concrete slabs. All the rest is new. But it looked the same. It does not only look the same, I think it keeps the spirit of the time. And that was important for us, to keep this free spirit, which the American architecture at that time had. So we did this, and it was very, very difficult to renovate it in that way, where you see, hopefully, not a big difference, but make it fit into the German sustainability laws. Some pictures of that. Another example of the same time is this one. This was also from the Americans, the America House, which brought culture, the American culture, to Germany. And same story, Kennedy was there, very important building in the 60s. A lot of lecturers, people, very important people came there, brought the American culture and democracy to Germany. And after 50 years of use, all the charm was more or less left. It was run down, louvers and thick roof and so on and so on. And again, we renovated it with a lot of work to bring it back to that spirit that it had before. And the mayor of Frankfurt was very impressed that he saw a building which was 50 years old, and it was only to do that it was in nice shape, nice colors, that he could see the spirit which was before completely lost. The inside, we put a basement underneath, which was never there. And nowadays it's used as a Cervantes Institute, a Spanish institute, and they have a logo, and we made a wall of that logo for the building, but we made it in a way that you can misunderstand it if it was from there, from the time of the 50s, or it was new to keep a whole item together. And the last building of that period is, or a bit later, is the Silver Tower in Frankfurt. That was for a very long time the highest tower in Europe, built in 1978 by a Frankfurt office ABB. And you see the spirit of that time. It was the time of the moon landing, and therefore it had to have round corners. It showed the optimism of that time to the way of thinking about technique and so on. And now it has to be renovated, and of course you could have made another tower out of it. It was completely run down, and we kept again only the concrete slabs, and in that case we kept the aluminium outside sheets of the facade, but only the outside panels, 4 millimeter thick, very nicely manufactured outside panels, and all the rest is new. And made a building which reflects the spirit of that time without changing it a lot. A bit we changed it. That was the inside before. This is the inside now. To get advantages, we did that, by the way, together with the former architect of that tower. Well, and a completely different situation is in China. We were invited for a competition for a civic house, civic center in Hangzhou, and we saw that they have this food there, and they had a situation. I mean, it's not there; it's only the plan. But so as far as I know, the Chinese, it's really like this in 10 years' time, or maybe in 5 years' time. And so we designed a building for this watery area, hoping that it is a bit in the tradition of that place. And they saw it the way. We competed with 4 other Chinese offices and one with that design. And it's actually for me the same. It is to go into a time or a place and find out what is the spirit of this place is. The second topic for us is, and I share that probably with Hopkins, and I've worked for Foster for a while, where there is a lot of similar thinking in this kind of offices, I assume, that it's always important for us to make things new, not for making things all the time new, but for being lively. I mean, you have to develop new ways for architecture. You have to prove very carefully if everything new is better than the old thing, but nevertheless, that is one of our engines inside, that we are thinking of new things, and so future is now. And again, I can use with my name, I can use this cars always as an example. This is my car, it's not a Ferrari, it's a Tesla, and I was really, really impressed 5 years ago. I have this car now 5 years ago, when I found that there is a firm who makes a change, who tries and is brave enough to propose a change. This is an electric car, and since in my house I have since 10 years I have not a gas heating system. I have a power station, a small power station with a combustion engine, but for heating the house, I learned that heating is a combustion engine is good for heating, but not good for moving. For moving, an electric engine is much better, since all the energy which you put in that car goes into movement and not into heat. It's not completely fast, but it accelerates really fast, and that's a lot of fun, by the way. And it makes no noise, which is quite nice to have it in a city. I mean, it's Frankfurt, where I come from. It's not a city like Mexico. It's a bit smaller. So, and in that context of progress, of looking forward, is also we see this building, which was for us a very important building in 1995. And since I see myself a bit an ambassador of Germany here, I tell you a bit about about Germany at that time. We did this info box, so-called info box, and I have to explain you a bit about the historic background of that time. After this horrible Second World War, Germany was divided in two halves. One was under control of England, of Great Britain, of France, and of United States, and the other one of Russia. Cold War was the notion of that time. And Berlin, the former capital and the nowadays capital of Germany, lies in the east part and was divided right in the middle. And in that middle, it looked like that. The so-called death strip. I don't know if it says anything to you on this half of the world. The so-called death strip was a wall through the country, which the east side of Germany erected to prevent people from running away from East Germany. And it was a very ugly thing. It was a wall and on both sides bombs and so on. A lot of people lost their life there by trying to get out of the so-called DDR. Yeah, and in 1989, a peaceful revolution took place. Very, very seldom in mankind's history, but the Germans somehow managed, especially the East Germans, to get rid of their corrupt system. And so Germany reunited each other. And the big countries around let it happen. That was also a very pleasant fact. So after 40 years of division, the actual middle of Berlin was again the middle of Berlin. And so a big boom came onto this side to erect buildings. Big companies, Sony, Mercedes, Deutsche Bank, Deutsche Bahn, wanted to erect big buildings there. And right in the middle, there are some pictures of that time to see what happened in Germany there. And there you already see what happened around this info box. And the info box was the result. The info box was a result of a competition, since the public of Berlin was a bit unhappy about the development, and they wanted to be informed about what's going to happen there. And so a small competition was launched. Actually, not a competition that says build us an info box. It was a competition asking for temporarily building, which you can put apart after 5 years of use, a tent-like structure or so. Yeah, but we proposed this design, a box put on stilts, 2 stories high, red colored, a building that makes clear that it's not there for all the time, a building that is sort of abstract in scale to make sure that you can divide it from the actually erected buildings on the side. And the funny thing was the companies, they actually didn't want really to build that. It cost money, and they want to put the money in the other buildings. So, and they reckoned 300 visitors per day. But when the box were there, 12,000 visitors came, and in altogether 7 million people came to this box, and they even married there. They had meetings and parties and whatever, and became a focus point. Some of the people said it was the building of the German reunification. So it really became a place, and I see that also in this field of innovation, since this building goes into another Zusammenhang, into another context of architecture, and that manages very well. So now I give you some pictures of projects we did in Frankfurt, only shortly, and I combine it with some information about the time I'm coming from. Frankfurt is related to Mexico City, very, very small. We have 700,000 inhabitants. The area around Frankfurt is 4 million. For German scales, it feels quite big. And what is really fairly big is the airport. So maybe a lot of people or from you have already been in Frankfurt, but most of them just by hubbing there and going somewhere else. So it looks inside. It's the only city in Germany which has a sort of high-rise, and therefore it feels much bigger than it is. It's ruled by the banks. It has a motor show, very important motor show, the IAA, and a book fair. I already mentioned the important airport for us. And we have the European Central Bank. You might hear some problems we have at the moment with our money. The British are not in that problem. I hope they someone join the problem. And so looks Frankfurt. And of course we have traditional housing. That's the center of Frankfurt, the mayor's house, and some wooden houses there. And that is Johann Wolfgang Goethe, our national literal hero. So and we of course we have typical food like this and this. And I show you this glass since it has a meaning for a project of us. It's apple cider. It's a bit a strange drink actually. And it's served in these kind of typical glasses. Now I'm going to show you some projects where I think we tried in that time to innovate things in architecture. For example, this advertisement company in a fairly run-down area at that time. It's 15 years old, the building now. And it's a building for an advertisement company, and we wanted to show, like advertisement shows you something, we just wanted to present the structure of the building, the concrete slabs and the columns, and the people. And sometimes when they have good commissions, they show you what they make advertisement for, Jaguar or something like this they can put in the glass there. And this was the first double-glazed hanging glass facade in Germany at that time. It took us a lot of work, but we wanted to create a show window, and that was a construction we thought to create a good show window. Or this building here, we planned that whole area here, town planning wise, and architecturally we did this building, this, and the building here. And the tower is an example again for what we tried with innovation. It's a West Harbor Tower. And since that area was not one of the most expensive areas in Frankfurt, we were not allowed to use curved glass for the facade, so we took that compromise to make triangular structure, to make the tower look rounder than with plain glasses. And by doing that, it is also to do with the plan of the tower, since inside it's difficult to have separations wall together with this kind of facade. So in the inside it's actually a square-like, it's not a round tower, it's a square tower. And so we have sort of winter gardens, which are important for the energy and saving energy in winter, and by opening them, not gaining unfortunate energy in summer, and gaining also a nice space where you can put a staircase inside. And this is how it looks. And I showed you the drink, the apple cider glass before, since the Frankfurters call it the ripped. This glass is called the ripped, since this structure is ripped, and they call now the tower the ripped. And when there was the opening, I said in a small speech, I said, well, we did this and this and this to construct the tower, and we have reasons and so on, as I told you now. But the last thing was we looked at this glass and thought, well, we are right. And at the next day, there was standing the ripped in the newspaper, and I got a very bad letter from the owner of the tower. His high-tech tower now is a ripped, and so on and so on. He was very angry. But we are very fond of that. We think this is exactly what we actually want to happen. That but it was not purposely, I admit, but it connects with the city on a completely different level. And I think that is the best architecture can do in the end. And by the way, it's a very the Frankfurters like that tower. Maybe therefore, since it's a good tower, but this is another way to come in contact with architecture. We do other buildings. Again, innovation. This is a high-story rack. High-story rack buildings are just for purpose to store things. They are usually a metal box painted somehow, some color, and maybe a logo on top. Yeah, and we do the high-story rack for Erco, a lighting producer in the middle of Germany. And with him, we said we make it transparent. We make it to see what happens inside. It's a bit more expensive than the cheap cladding, but it gives completely different. And it's talking about light, about maybe your light fittings, and it's talking about how the building sits in the landscape. It's a quite beautiful landscape there, and related to the landscape, the building is actually too big. It's one of the biggest buildings there. But by using these glass panels and this lighting installation, we put a lighting installation, and it is related to the barcode. You know, this barcode is actually, that's the only reason why this whole thing works, to find the boxes with the right lighting fitting there. And these lightings here, they change very slowly at night. It's not like this. It's going out and on and out and on, and changes this pattern slowly, and makes quite a nice view and a nice picture in the landscape. And somebody thought it looks like if the building is dreaming. And it's just a very normal industrial building. Doesn't work all the time here. Well, another example for this innovation, Brown. Brown is a manufacturer nowadays from toothbrushes, electric toothbrushes. But in the 70s they made radios, and what is Apple today with a very good design was Brown in the 60s and 70s. They were revolutionary in making clear, self-explaining design, which is not so good, I think, today. But they invited us for a competition, and we won it for the headquarters. And I just show you some pictures of that building as well, since this is also about what we think is innovation. There's a water basin in the middle and a nice transparent glass facade. And outside, the facade can open and close related to the season with the same reason, like the West Harbor Tower, to save money by better insulation, by having more layers of glass, and by not having too much solar gain in summer by opening them when necessary. You see the outside facade, though the second layer of the skin opens and leaves the bad heated solar gain outside. My third important point is architecture only comes to life when you make good details. And there are two examples. The Brown building, for example, I found that very interesting at that time. The double facade has this sort of clips here, these openings. Instead of opening the whole window, you open these small doors here. And you do that with this small grip, and we designed the grip, and it's like the fridge. It's a magnetic thing. It's not a magnetic thing like a window. You can just pour it and tear it. And took us quite a lot of effort to make that, but this way is much easier. You just tear it, it's open, you mind it goes together, and just two buttons here for the louvers. Very self-explaining, very simple. Or another example is this stair. The stair I will show you later on in another context. It's a concrete stair, and for me the very important detail is this grip. Yeah, it's nicely done to get a good grip, but when you don't need it, there where you don't need it, it's not there, and then it comes to life, and it sort of brings you and leads you down the stair, and at the end, at the bottom, it again vanishes. And I think it's very small detailing, but it's nice, and since I hope that this stair is there for 100 years or more, it's very important to do this in a good way. So, now I'm sort of in the middle already, very fast. I show you now 3 projects more detailed, which we did in the last 2 years. One project is about art. The first one is an extension to a museum. Second project is about technique. And the last one is a church. I always saw these 3 projects, for me, they always were somehow related, or they have nothing to do with each other in reality. The first one is a Städel Museum in Frankfurt. I always was impressed. What you see there is the magic of things. It's a small painting, 20 by 20 centimeters. And I was always impressed. If you see that in reality, you feel the feeling you have when you have this pear on your teeth. I think it is such a nice thing, and I think this magic of things you can see in the Städel and probably in your art collections here as well. And I think this magic of things are also in architecture sometimes, if you come close to architecture. So this is the Städel Museum, and this is the Städel Art School. And he already mentioned, I went after I did my diploma in Kaiserslautern, a normal German diploma. I went to this small school in Frankfurt, which has a very small class, and Peter Cook was running that class at the time, only 15 students internationally from all over the world. And therefore I have a strong relationship to this area. And I also live there. I'm living next door to this building there. The Städel itself was the first foundation in Germany. Johann Gottfried Städel was a rich salesman, and he decreed his money and his paintings to the people of Frankfurt, and that happened for the first time in Europe. Yeah? And he said, well, you take my money and you erect a building for the collection, and you erect a school. That he said in his testament. And then he said some other very important thing, that all the directors of the Städel Museum had to sell the art and buy new art, so that the collection is always sort of in time. Yeah? It's not a dead collection. And by doing that, they erected 50 years after his death. He died in 1805, I think, or 70 years after his death. He erected the first two buildings, at that time far out of Frankfurt, of the small Frankfurt at that time, the museum and the school. But since the directors had to collect new art, there came a lot of things to the museum, and so already 50 years after the first building, they made the first extension, the so-called garden wing, in the axis of the existing building, the garden wing. That's the front building here. And then the World War II destroyed a lot. The Städel had in this position there were guns, and since they had guns on the roof, the Allies destroyed the building very heavily, and so one of the directors of the Städel School after the war put new towers on the old building to bring it again into use. And then another 50 years later, they enlarged the whole museum again with a building by Gustav Peicher, an Austrian architect. And then they put in a small restaurant there in 1998. And now comes our story. The director from today, Max Hollein, son of Hans Hollein, which maybe some of you know, a very famous Pritzker Prize winner of Austria. He came into trouble since the art became so expensive. Mexicans are as well very rich since you have oil, and the Russians are very rich, and so the Russians could, and the Mexicans maybe, could pay large amounts of money for art pieces, 100 million or 50 million. And so the Städel, he couldn't win that competition. So he had to find another way to find art, to find new art, to do what Städel obeyed them to do. And he saw the banks on the other side of the Städel in Frankfurt and decided, I asked them if they are not willing to give me their art they collected in the last years. And so he went to Deutsche Bank and to Dresdner Bank and to another bank and negotiated with them. And so in the end, they came up that 1,000 art pieces from the time of 1950 to 2000 were given by the banks to the museum of the Städel as a present for all times. Not really as a present, it's still owned by the bank, but it's there for all the times. So he had to find place for 1,000 new art pieces. And you see already there is not much place on this side. There's a beautiful garden. There was a beautiful garden. And so he made a competition. 8 architects were invited, and we were lucky to be with them. It was Sana with them. Dilla and Scofidio, quite good architectural offices. He knows very well, since he was working for Guggenheim before, and he knows the architectural scene. So, and he invited them with the question where to put an extension of 3,000 square meters exhibition space. And the existing buildings here altogether, they have 4,000 square meters exhibition space. You see it's nearly a doubling of the size. And so that was the first important question for all the competitors to say, where can we put it? There was a lot of ways. You could put a new garden wing here, or you could put a building here, or put something in the courtyard there, or bring it in the garden underneath the garden. And that was our solution we choose, to say, well, that is actually the ideal place. We go underneath the garden, since this is in the aisle of the existing buildings. It will create a huge area of 3,000 square meters on one level, which makes it possible to relate the art very well to each other. And we keep the garden, since that is important for the city. But it was a risky decision when we made that, since people don't like to go underneath the earth. It's difficult to collect money for a project underneath the earth. You have no facade. The Bilbao effect. I mean, in Germany, museums are very well running at the time. They have a lot of visitors. The Städel last year had 500,000 visitors. It was nearly, more than half as much as a football team has in Germany, and that will say a lot. Yeah, so they always have to create new things, and the so-called Bilbao effect is very important. And so to go underneath the earth and nearly see nothing of the building was a very hard decision for us. But we took this decision since we were convinced that this running through the main axis, here's the entrance, and giving a good alternative to the existing part down in the basement, and still having the garden was reason enough to take that decision. And here you see how it works in section. You enter up from the River Main to the entrance hall, and before you could go only up into the existing exhibition spaces here, and we proposed a new stair going down, another new stair going further down into the so-called garden halls. That's the entrance of the Städel, the old entrance into the old gallery, and here it was closed, and here it was closed, and we proposed to open that. That was our animation for the competition, and to see already there is something down there. So, and then we worked hard on the, so actually the parts we designed on the building are three. Yeah, we have to design a stair, we have to design the roof, and we have to design the roof lights, and these things I'm going to show you now. The stair you have already seen, where I was talking about this handrail thing here, but the whole stair was a lot of computer work to find that shape, and we tried to connect it with the formal items of the existing buildings, since we wanted the visitors of the Städel always to go continuously through the history, not with shocks. Yeah, the space, you will see that later underneath, is very different from the spaces of the old gallery, but the way towards the spaces feels always very smoothly developed. Yeah, you have never a break, and so these shapes are the similar shapes the old building has, and then it suddenly develops to another form. Some pictures of the development of the shape, and we made this special formwork. We let them. It was produced by a car manufacturer in Hanover. It's styrofoam with polyester on top, and of course we made a model of the stair. And I'm impressed from our times that changed really in the last 25 years for me being an architect. And nowadays you can make so precise models. This is a model. This is the actual built stair in the state of not finished, and this is the stair finished. And it's really, that is very, for your generation, that's a difference to when I started architecture. We're not really sure what we got in the end. Now we more or less see definitely that it's very similar to that. Again, a section to the building. The next important part is, of course, the actual garden halls and the development of that ceiling. Yeah, here you see some of our drawings. I mean, when we were sure it is the best place for this big space, but how to develop the ceiling? Yeah, first it was like this, and then we came up with the idea. In this space, there's no orientation. It is all the same height, and 3,000 square meters is underneath the earth. You have no contact to outside. It's quite a big area, and if you do that, you have a middle, and if you make holes in, you have light. So, and then we try to manipulate the shape to get the light as elegant as possible in this space. That was a model. And then we developed on the computers the ceiling structure, which took us quite a while, since it's actually very easy with all your programs to make the rough shape, but it's not easy to make it so precise that you can produce it. That there were to employ a mathematician to get rid of like this for these breaks here. If you have breaks like this or like this here, then in the end the ceiling is not really smooth. And the third topic was the lighting here. We call them eyes, since they work similar like our eyes. They have to, of course, to deal with the natural light, and they have to deal with the artificial light, and the natural light, of course, has to be brought under control. And so it became altogether a very complicated thing. We have a glass pan on top, 6 centimeter glass pan, which is a bit, which is a bit bowed, so that there is no dirt in the middle, which was technically very difficult. And then there is a layer where we can close it or reduce the amount of light coming through. Then there's a layer with the artificial light, and then there's a transparent layer to prevent direct view from inside to the outside and the other way around. And again, these form work for pouring the concrete in, done by the car producer in Hanover, by the way, and was brought on the rivers to the building site. And a fairly complicated logistic to bring. We had 80 of these panels, and the whole thing is 200. We needed 200, and so we put them in the 4 corners and poured the ceiling in 5 sections, actually. You can see there's the formwork here, already the ceiling in concrete, and now the next part is this, and then comes this, and then comes this, and the last was the middle piece. Here it's already, everything is poured, and these squares here are for the louvers, since the louvers are a sort of normal jalousie going from being completely transparent to completely closed. And of course there's a lot of steelwork inside and heating pipes and cables. That was the building site shortly before we put on the earth on the top. And the room inside. I mean, that is definitely a very green, sustainable museum. One part is, of course, it's in the earth, so there's little amount of sunlight bringing too much heat inside, and of course it is not losing heat. So actually heating and cooling was absolutely no problem. We have 40 poles, geodetic poles in the earth, and the water from underneath is enough. The difference in temperature is enough to cool and heat the whole building through the ceiling and through the floor. The actual energy problem is the lighting. The lighting that was what needs most energy, since the museum has to be bright enough to see the pictures. Well, and that's a finished museum. The separation walls here, the walls to put on the paintings, never reach the ceiling, of course, and these walls you can change them. They are temporarily. They are meant for 5 or 3 to 10 years, and this is the first stage in the museum. I wonder when they will be first changed. That was a garden before we started, and that was a plan to make the lawn, and that was the computer animation for the competition. And this is a photograph of the final project. I always think it looks more artificial than the other. That's again artificial. And this is real. Real, as a photography can be real. And this is my favorite picture of the project. So, a completely different subject is...
Michael, can I just make a short interruption? And just to say something to the public dealing with the translators. Sí. Hay una solicitud de algunos de ustedes del público si pueden regular el volumen individualmente de tal manera que no... parece ser que hay algunas, bueno, no sé si quejas o observaciones por ahí de que no dejan escuchar a los que no tienen el traductor. Entonces nada más si pueden regular el volumen de tal manera que bueno, pues puedan percibir las otras personas lo que está diciendo el conferencista, de favor. Pero es individualmente el control del volumen. Gracias. Sorry, you can continue, please.
So the next project I would like to show is, as I said, completely different topic. It's a particle accelerator. It's for us a very strange experience to get a commission like this. We were part of a what's called a specification. They were looking for planners, and we applied for this job, and were together with NAC, other office, we were taken to build a particle accelerator close to Frankfurt. Some of you might know what particle accelerators are about. It's a sort of circle. The most famous is in CERN in Genf, a very huge circle. And in that circle there's a machine, a magnet actually, and this tube, and in that tube they are running very small particles, atoms, yeah, but very small. Yeah, but they are also running very fast, nearly with the speed of light, and so a whole lot of energy is taken to keep that particles in that round. And so somehow it has this very strange magic, this project for us. It's run by India and Russia and Germany, and it will take 5 or 6 years to build it. At the moment they are drilling in holes for the poles. They will have 2,000 poles in the earth by 70 meters deep to make a strong foundation for that building. And we founded a company which is called Ion 21, Ion 42, and the 42 is taken from a story. I don't know if you know, it's more maybe not in your generation. We read that the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a very famous and funny book from Douglas Adams, and in that book mankind built a huge computer to find the last answers of mankind, and they built the computer, and the computer was calculating, and after years of calculation he said the answer is 42. Last answer of everything is 42, and then okay, they built another machine to find out what was actually question to 42, and we thought that story was for us similar, fantastic, like the whole machine is fantastic in a way. We learned then by dealing with these problems what it's good for. There's quite a lot of, for example, CERN, the World Wide Web was invented in CERN as a byproduct of CERN. Yeah? They just wanted to have a method to communicate all over the world, and so in actual fact a huge machine built for some completely different purpose brought up this very helpful, and we all use it, item of the World Wide Web. And here in Darmstadt, they have a lot to do with brain tumors. This technique helps a lot to destroy tumors in the middle of our heads. So there is a lot of practical purposes, but me, or probably you also too, it's difficult to understand what they are actually doing. In actual fact, I understood the mathematicians of the world found out by making calculation that there must be something to explain something. And these machines are there to prove that it's really like that. And sometimes they suddenly have a success, and then it's in the newspapers. So I already said it's all about the beam. The whole machine is a beam thing. And it's there. It's in the middle of nowhere in the landscape. And that might be a reason why we came into that project, since we are, as being architects, have a certain feeling to find a not so brutal way to build a huge machinery into this countryside. Here you see the size of the project. There is already a small particle accelerator. This is probably the size of your campus here. This already existing. That's the actual huge big accelerator, 1 kilometer. And the particles go out here, then they go into that machine, and then they crush in these so-called caves. And there they measure some radiation, and concrete thickness here is up to 10 meters, which is technically also not so easy. And we were looking, okay, well, it's a machine. I mean, there's not that much to design, but you can try to bring it some sort of harmless into landscape. And then that funny thing happened. The computer programs we used for making the Städel Museum turned out to be quite interesting for this project. I mean, as you see, there is nothing to design. It's not an aesthetic question. It's all a rational question. And here energy plays an important role, since the amount of energy to run the machine is enormous. And so the shorter the ways for the currency, the better it is. And I give you a small example here, which I was always impressed of. If you have these 4 dots here, and you would like to, or you want to connect them on the shortest way, after a while of thinking, most of you probably would say it's like this. Some would try it like that, or others like that. That's even more unfortunate. But this is also not the shortest way. This is the shortest way. And that's sort of a bit out of our normal understanding. And so with the computer programs, with these programs, we did the Städel staircase and the cupola. We are now optimizing this particle accelerator, which is for me very interesting, since I think that means go from one theme to the other, from one topic to the other. And again, we use the same programs for an aesthetic reason. There is, of course, radiation, not a lot of radiation. It's not really dangerous or so, but since these particles, when they crush into, there's radiation. And since we want the walls to be mosey, we want to have green walls, it's concrete outside, the whole machinery is concrete outside, and we try to give them a surface that gets green in the shortest time possible. And so we use, again now for designer reasons, these programs. So, and in the end, it will probably somehow end up like this, or maybe similar. I mean, the scientists working on that project are completely unpredictable. They change their plans every day, which is very hard for us since it's such a big project. So, and the last project I show you is a church, which is, for me, very closely related to the other 2 projects. This is a beautiful German motorway. And there are very often much more cars on the motorway. I can convince you. It's not always like as empty as you see it here. But it's, you see, it's a very nice landscape, and when you drive here, you see the spot where I'm standing on very good from the motorway. And in that region of Germany, a small group of people decided to build a church, since they are believing people from different directions. and they decided to privately finance a church on a parking area of the motorway, since they found out that nobody goes into the churches in the town. But there on the motorway, it's a special point between Netherlands and Switzerland, and so a lot of lorries have to stop there and have to make a break. And then obviously they found out a lot of people like to use that break to have a spiritual experience. And so they arranged a small competition to erect on these, for German standards, fairly huge parking area with a washing machine for lorries and a petrol station, of course, and a hotel and a gambler's center. They proposed to have a church here. As I said, they invited 4 people for a competition. 3 were from the region. We were sort of the foreigners there. And I found it a very interesting task to work on that. But what can you do? It's a very small church, very small. What can you do if you have to erect a building in actually such an ugly place? Yeah, it's a place is dominated by the Burger King sign, by the hotel, where the writing hotel is bigger than the actual building. Yeah, and so we came up with the idea, a good way might be to use a sign. These are our German signs to show that there is a church. Yeah, and we decided to take that sign to make a design. And so that was a first sketch. Seen from the motorway, you see actually the sign, only an abstract sign, and beneath, next to the pylon with the hamburgers and the hotel. And then the sign becomes a building. And that was our proposal. This is the motorway seen from the other side. When you come from Dortmund, you see Burger King, hotel, the church. That was a plan of the church we proposed, a square room, sign here for the parking area, sign here for the motorway, a square room, and connected via a bridge. There was the slope is going down there, and we thought a bridge appropriate to get a bit of distance between the car and the church. And we proposed to have something different inside. Somehow, from the outside being a very abstract building, we wanted it to be in the inside a very concrete building, a very direct and nice building. And we proposed that plan in the jury, and when I presented it, I went to a very beautiful house, small beautiful house, only 4 competitors presenting their projects, and I was sitting in the room next to the jury. The door was very, very thin, so I could hear the jury talking, and the priest, the Catholic priest, was complaining in the inside. I don't want to have a concrete church. I don't like concrete at all. We don't build a concrete church here, and I was next to present a concrete church. And so I said, well, the idea is to go from the sign to the church, and inside a bit different from outside. And by the way, from the outside, it is very important to have a white church. The material doesn't matter at all. We proposed concrete, but a white church. Yeah? And with a white church, we won the competition. Actually, the idea of the concrete was, since I knew that some of the investors or the sponsors had concrete firms there, and it was very easy for them to build that very cheaply in concrete, but that turns out to be a very big error. I mean, in the end, it became a wooden church, and it became a wooden white church. That was a model of the church. You see, my partner said, you will never win that competition, it looks like Batman. I said, wait. And it looks like Batman, but I mean, Batman is a lot to do with the church. So, and the inside. I was in the drawing with a circular plan inside. I was thinking, when we draw the competition, we didn't know how to design the inside. We had only the feeling that, yeah, I know everybody knows a lot of churches, and you know, I was brought up Catholic. I went out of church when I was 18, but now I have paid all the church tax with this project, so God never forgets anything. So, but I wanted to have a a spiritual insight, an insight which is not, which brings you another atmosphere than you normally know from normal buildings. So we found a way for the inside to build a cupola inside, a wooden cupola, with these sort of ribs to create a dome and to create a space between the outside church. And the towers are not towers with a bell inside, the towers are just roof lights. And so the light comes in between this space. I mean, I think that's very often the secret of churches, that they have very thick walls, and the inside is not the outside. A normal building has the inside and the outside more or less the same, but here the inside is completely separated from the outside. Some pictures of the model, and some pictures of the real site. That is the parking area at the top of the church, and the big sign. And then we made the foundation in concrete, and then we found a builder for the wooden church, but the builder turned out to be unable to build the church, and so we had these foundations for 2 years. And then we changed the builder, we took another one, but it was a quite nice foundation, actually. Then found these guys to build the church in wood. Some pictures of the building site. But that's nothing to do with our church, it's only the construction, since it's not completely finished, but nearly finished. This is now the outside. As I told you, it's a white church. Not completely finished. You bring to everything that tells you directly what it's good for. A hotel to pay some money, very little money. A hamburger to eat, a petrol station. How can you add something which tells you, well, life is about a lot of things and you never know, and so on. And I think somehow this sort of thing does it. I hope so. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Michael. Well, we have here some questions from the public. The first one says, well, a lot of projects, a lot of your projects, are you ready? Sorry.
Now I can understand you. I can understand you that way. Do I need that?
Well, I'm making in English the question to you, so you don't have to. Yeah, I'll make the questions. Yeah, a lot of your projects look. They look for a site or building memory recovery. This usually causes a positive social impact. And now here comes the question. How important is for you to bring new architecture within an historical context? Isn't that a little bit protagonic?
How important it is for me to bring new architecture to?
Within a historical context or
I mean, there's no other way. If you put a new building to a place where there is already something, it is a new building in connection with the old buildings. I mean, that's evident. What I think is every time has to find its own ways to express itself. I think it does not need to be completely different from the others, from the other buildings. I think it has to integrate into all old surroundings, but nevertheless it has to make sure it is from now and not from 1850 or so. Does that answer the question?
I hope so, yes. Thank you. Well, another question. How has Germany's historic background influenced contemporary architecture?
Difficult question. I think as you're here in Mexico, I mean, I think your background always influences your your way of seeing. I mean, it is probably in Germany, especially also to do with our horrible history. Maybe we are therefore. Maybe therefore modern architecture is so hopeful for us, since other historical architecture for Germans were a bit also the reason for this First and Second World War disaster. So it probably we are in another situation than other countries there with modern architecture. Maybe it influences us more than other countries.
Yeah. Okay. And well, from the same person, apart from monuments, is there a certain interest in Germany in keeping the war spirit alive through contemporary architecture?
Yeah, I mean, it's as I told you, I think Germany is quite good in memory things. Yeah, I think we have a good way. Since it was so disastrous, we think that it's necessary to keep it alive, and not in always saying, oh, there was a war or so, but that's a way of keeping up tradition, and I think we do that in a quite good way. We have some also built some memorials in Germany.
Okay. Next, what are the risks of working on an unconventional project like the particle accelerator? How did you manage it?
On what kind of project? On a particle accelerator.
The particle accelerator.
What's the risk?
Yeah, well, he says, what are the risks of working on such an unconventional way, and how do you do it?
Well, I think to work in architecture is always a very big risk. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a particle accelerator or an office building or a small church or whatever. Me and my partner, we always thought it's important. We have a view how building is more than only square meters. I think we think there is building art, yeah, building Baukunst. And so actually we try to build everything what we get under our fingers. Well, we build bridges, and we're doing something in China, and some of them are better, some of them are not so good. But there's always a risk that you cannot get as far as you wanted, and I'm not sure the particle accelerator for its own reasons. It is not about architecture. It's a machinery. It's more land art or engineering, and we knew that. And bridges are as well. So we use our skills to improve them.
Okay. Well, the next one is what kind of design programs do you use, and how we can know where does human creativity ends and the use of CAD becomes a must?
With the use of?
The CAD?
CAD. Yeah, well, MicroStation and a lot of other programs, I don't know them all. I mean, I must admit I use a computer for writing and for making SMS and things like that. This discussion is 15 years old, creativity and computers. I personally think that all our means have nothing to do with creativity or not. Yeah, it is only a question how we use them. And I must say I'm quite convinced that it was good for the creativity. I mean, there's always a danger, especially for your generation, since the computer programs are more complicated than a pencil. Yeah, so you all spend more time by thinking about this instead of the result. Yeah, we have a lot of students and pupils in the office, and they very often cannot separate between the picture and the reality, but that is two things. I mean, you make it. I mean, the pictures. I mean, the pictures from the computer, the animation. The light comes out of the machine. Yeah, there's light inside the machine who shows you the picture, and architecture is never with light inside, or exceptions. So usually the light comes onto it. It's a complete difference. I mean, it's this real big difference between digital photography and analog photography. I mean, we all do it the same. You press a button and then the picture looks sort of like you or so. But it's in actual fact, it's a complete different how you can manipulate the things. And the one is a chemical reaction. The other one is just zeros and ones. Yeah, it changes, but for me, not to the bad. I mean, your generation, you have to be aware what happens with these machines, and we will have some new opportunities. But in the end, buildings are the same if they are computer generated, the plans, or if not. The building is material, and that behaves not completely different from before.
Yes, I agree. It is two completely separate things, creativity and all these tools. The next one is, how long has it taken, to construct the church? I mean, it's not still finished, but the whole process probably?
No, as I said, I paid all the church tax on this project. It took too long. To develop it. I mean, right from the beginning, we knew that, that the church was a sort of hobby of mine in the office. But we knew that the church is an interesting combination of being abstract, being concrete, being a sign, being an object. And it took us 3 years, more or less, to develop it. But we couldn't have done that being a young office, who has to live on that project.
Okay, the next one is, there is certain resistance to building in wood because some people say that it's not sustainable. What do you think about this?
As far as I know, we have 1,000-year-old wood buildings as well as 1,000-year-old stone buildings. It is to do with the roof. I mean, stone is, of course, a stronger material, but for our normal standards of duration, I think that's in Germany in the last years, wood was more interesting since it became cheaper on the market, and technique to work with wood became more elaborate. And so for a lot of wide-spanning sports halls, for example, that was steel before, always changed to wood. And since the trees grow fairly fast, it's in my eyes it's a very good material. But I would not say concrete is bad, wood is good, or the other way around. I think that's always to do with the project.
Well, I think those are all the questions. Thank you very much, Michael. And I don't know if is another question around there. No. Well, and I would like to introduce you to our director of the faculty, Marcos Massari, just because he was not here before, to give you welcome, and perhaps to take advantage
for your nice university. You definitely have the most beautiful modern university campus that I know.
And now we are concerned with its conservation. It's now 50 years old, and
you need good architects to.
Así es que todos tomen nota, ¿eh? Necesitamos buenos arquitectos. Eso quiere decir que hay chamba para todos. That means we will have work for everybody. Well, we want to thank you, and this is well. It's in Spanish. It's that you have been part of this 8th Congress in International Architectural on High Technology and Bioclimatic Sustainable Design. We are very grateful with you because you had the time to come. We know you have a very busy agenda, and it's it's a pleasure for us to have the opportunity to hear you here.
It was a pleasure for me to be here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bien.
And if you have space in your suitcase, this is about colonial architecture in Mexico. You don't have this, so perhaps it's a good book for your library.
Perhaps for some inspiration for the future.